This is Critical Nonsense, our high-lowbrow show about culture, science, and tech. This week, I ask Joey about concert rage.
Woo!
Yup. This is what Joey sounds like. And this is what an executive producer and Earth Gang member, Jess Vander, sounds like.
Hi, this is Jess. I don't know.
I don't know. Jessica, I heard tell that you've been in your sociologist mindset.
Wow. Who knew I had that? That's usually a you thing. But
Is it? Maybe. Yeah.
yeah.
Kombucha
You
face.
certainly read more books and articles on such subjects than I. Better read. But
it's a bold statement.
Through lived experience, it is true. I did get into a little bit of a noodle, a mind wine mulling cider spiced glog.
We're mixing metaphors.
Journey. Yep. I went to a concert last week. It was my first ever at Madison Square Garden. It was really exciting.
The
to
Mecca.
see Maggie Rogers of, fame.
Maggie Rogers fame.
Musical fame. Yeah, exactly. I was like, ooh. Actually, a longer time ago, it would have been of Alaska fame, but then now
of Pharrell video fame.
Of NYU Pharrell Discovery fame. Anyway.
Yeah.
She's incredible. It was a great concert. But it was really interesting being in the venue and analyzing the optimal seating or sort of ticket situation, because the way it was laid out, there was sort of the general admission section up the front where people were sort of just standing and packed in and could move around. Then there was a separate set of seats that were just on the floor, but barricaded behind. And then behind that and all around the whole rest of the stadium was sort of bleacher type seating. We were sitting there with our bleacher seats, and I was realizing that I much rather be where I was further away in a protected zone than have to deal with the elbowing and the fracas that would be inevitably going down in the standing general admissions area. Because as anyone who's ever been to a live concert knows, where there's sort of that open space, there is this fascinating, what I have to call concert rage, like the equivalent of road rage, where because you're in a concert setting and or like a festival setting, somewhere where you're in a big crowd and you're packed in together, that it ignites, it provokes in us this like deep anger when anyone does anything that to us is unjust, like that tall guy butts in front of you and doesn't see any problem with standing directly in front of your line of sight, or somebody is just like dancing without thinking to themselves and is like getting their sweaty grossness all over you, and you're like, hello, have you no self-awareness? And it just got me thinking about, what is it about certain settings that just piss us off?
It's interesting because I don't think of you as being pissed off often. And so now I'm wondering, like, do you also experience this like liminal space rage phenomena?
I do think for me personally, much more so in this type of crowd setting than in a driving scenario, which to me is much more serious and like safety oriented, versus in a crowd, it's more about like manners and justice.
Yeah.
And that makes me so angry.
Yeah.
Also, too, because I think people have such different comfort levels and tolerances for this kind of thing. And so I recognize that someone else might be perfectly comfortable making me uncomfortable or affecting my experience. And that feels so wrong. And I think, I don't know, trigger some kind of righteousness that I definitely have within me.
Yeah. I mean, it does feel like all the scenarios that, you brought up, road rage and concert rage. And, you can think about how people behave at airports as like another
great example.
Like example of this. And I think what's interesting, at least as I'm like quickly reacting, is that, like I said, they are all these liminal spaces, these in-between spaces. And, if you compared how people behave in a restaurant outside of like outlier circumstances, right? Where like people are clearly like expressly breaking some set of norms, but like we have, and it will shift from culture to culture, region to region, country to country, those types of things of like what is the set of norms that we like agree on. But it's interesting. Often what happens is people who frequent those, people who drive a lot, or people who go to concerts a lot, or people who have to like travel at the airport a lot, like will fall into a set of social norms in those spaces because they frequent them often, right? Like if you watch how a business traveler that is like on the road like every other week moves through an airport, it is like not disruptive. It is like understanding like the dynamics of the space. It is like minimizing friction, like considering how you can get through the space quickly, whatever, versus, someone who hasn't, been on a trip maybe in 3 years, or like has not flown a lot of places. And I think like I see this when I'm riding my bike in the city, where I get like frustrated. I never like get that like road rage, but I'm just like, what are you doing? Like you're like in your head, just like, come on, like be cool. Like I'm literally in my head just going like, be cool, be cool. Like someone, like I see these people will like, there's someone stopped at a light, and you can see it's someone who's like visual signals, like, I don't know, it's a like bike messenger delivery person who is like like rides a lot, is fast, like is doing things, and then someone's like on like a Dutch bike and just rolls around them at a light and like pops in front of them, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, and then now that you're delaying that person from going forward because you chose to like go in front of them, like that liminal space has inherently like liminal norms unless you start to like express them or you're frequently there. Like, Jillian on our team, who is like at concerts all the time, probably has like a expanded list of what she believes are the social norms of the concert environment. But like other people were like, this is my first time going to a concert and I'm in the general admission and I'm going to go right up against the front gate at this Maggie Rogers show or whatever, know?
Right. Have you no respect for the rules? But I also can imagine somebody who has, been around the block, they're like a frequent concert goer. They also might have a higher tolerance for that type of behavior because they've seen it all and they understand that not everyone is as sort of versed in the ways of that space. Or, maybe you get so accustomed to it that it is harder to be able to relate to someone who has no conscientiousness in that setting. But I think there's like a piece of that's, I don't know. There's like this piece about how much other people are actually able to affect you and your experience, right? Like versus something where it's like, yeah, that is annoying, but it doesn't actually really influence me so much. And that feels like a key distinction here too.
There was a book that I think, I don't know, maybe this isn't it, it's talking about the unflustered mom. Maybe it is. Like that was what I searched, but this idea of how to be less flustered by your children when you are like, why are you doing, like, you're frustrated by something they do, or they've overwhelmed you in a moment that you weren't prepared for, and trying to like be a little bit more emotionally regulated so that it is easier on you, it's easier on them, whatever. I can't recommend or not the book. I just had heard about it when it came out. Maybe she had done like a Ezra Klein podcast or something like that. But that, it feels like that idea is, I think when I was younger, I think I probably got angry more on the road, either in a car or on my bike, just being like, come on, like when you were encountering someone doing like a dumb thing, you would just get frustrated. Right. And like now the only time I get really upset when I'm riding my bike is if someone like actively puts me in danger and does something dumb, right? Like a car swerves into the bike lane in front of me and I have to like slam on the brakes or get hit by them or hit them or something. Then I'm like, but what's funny is also like Emerson will now yell at them too if she's with me. Like we were riding down the road, like a car did that. I saw it coming and was able to stop, but then I had to go around him. And as we're going by, I went to like, just be like, come on, dude, or something like that. And then she's just in the back of the bike and she just goes, what the fuck? Like, and I'm just like, all right, well, modeling good behaviors, like good job.
And I definitely did that.
But she like somehow, like she doesn't do that all the time. Like it was like, this is one of the scenarios in which it is, you are just in yelling at this person, but we're both going by. Just imagine the person, they happen to be like looking. I think maybe they realize what they did. And like, we're both doing like the why I oughta fist as we like go by. Like you've been chided by a 5-year-old. But that idea of like becoming unflustered in liminal spaces because you can expect that someone is going to break your version of the social contract no matter what, right? Like on the road, someone's going to do a dumb thing, but it is not the plurality of people. It, like in that sort of like givers and takers type of dynamic, like sometimes it is because someone is just unconscientious and they don't realize, or they're distracted, or they're having a bad day, or whatever. And then occasionally it is just like someone who's just straight up being an a-hole,
Right. Yeah. And I it's interesting because like that alone is enough, even if it's something that you're biking every day or you're driving every day. It doesn't necessarily, even if you're not running late to something, it doesn't really affect you. That could still make you so annoyed because it's just like, you had no consideration. But I do think some of I'm trying to understand what are the pieces that can sort of instigate or aggravate that issue. I think the liminality is an interesting one where it is not as universal, the understanding or the awareness of rules, because there's a really wide range of experience level, or just like, people just don't have the same amount of being informed. But then I also think there's like a preciousness problem that comes in, especially with concert rage, where it's like, you're ruining it and this is it. Like we don't get to do this again. Like this is a one and done, like that's why I've even seen musicians who get really, and now most people have in the last 15 years, get so angry at concert goers who put their phones up, right? Like they're like, you're ruining this thing by putting your phone up, and like I, as the musician, am just trying to connect with you, and now you're just recording me. And I think like even the way that has evolved over time now, where the people on stage might even just say like, turn your light on or something. Like now we've like evolved the rules to come to some kind of stasis eventually, but like that idea of trying to protect the sanctity of a thing that doesn't get a do-over, I mean, that feels like a valid reason to be uniquely mad. And also, I would hope, especially for those who are more likely to be like the bitter stewing ones, like maybe also the opportunity to, I don't know, encourage people to feel empowered to say something and fight for their right to stand around that tall guy. I don't know.
Yeah, there is that dynamic, right, of like inherent in liminal spaces is they are no one's space, right? And so you are having to contend with the fact that people will have different expectations, different norms, different whatever it may be, and you may be coming into it wanting a thing that is very different than the person who is next to you, right? And so that you're like already getting set up. And the problem is like we don't really, I think, maybe is only specific to US culture or the sort of cultures of the places that I've been in, and is not universal, but I don't think in those liminal spaces we have a means of being able to sort of regulate our behaviors with the people that we're surrounded with without, like, it tends to not, you know, like you let little things go as like part of it, but then like something is approaching some threshold where it is like making someone upset, but we don't have a way of being like, hey, could you do this thing or that thing? Because you know, it's like who has priority in this situation. And that's also when you get into the behavior of like, if someone is demanding a thing of you versus asking, people will react very differently. They're like, hey, would it be all right if you didn't, you know, bump into me constantly? Like, and so invariably, like the requests only increasingly come out as like demands or frustration or argumentation, right? Like it is like a space that is prone to friction because it, like in your space or in your community spaces that you exist in, you have a means of like regulating that environment. And in a concert or an airport or on the road, you have no means of regulating the environment.
Right. And offensive maneuvers beat defensive maneuvers. It's way harder to be like to reclaim something once it has been taken. Someone's like, yeah, I'm gonna cut here. And then you have to be like, can you not? And they'll be like, make me. And now you're like, actually, I, as the person on the defensive, like the reason I didn't do that is because I'm not that, or I'm not thinking about things that way, or I'm trying to adhere to some kind of norm. And so trying to be the regulator, the enforcer to someone who doesn't want to be enforced, or at least is, you know, naive to enforcement. Your best case scenario is that they're like, oh, I had no idea that was the rule. Allow me to not, when in practice they're probably they're maybe trying to be willfully ignorant to the rules such that they can enhance their own personal experience.
Yeah, I mean, it is sort of, you know, there's that like David Foster Wallace commencement speech that like talks about like the like being out in spaces with people and like allowing your, you know, he starts with that goldfish idea of like, oh, the water's nice today, and the other goldfish is like, what is water? Like it is the thing that you are surrounded in that you can't take in. And I think when we're in those liminal spaces, we have a tendency to dehumanize the people that are in those spaces with us. And I think even the act of building like a really explicit and clear expectation of what you want or expect your experience to go like that day, whether it's a concert or the airport or on the road, doesn't leave room for the other people that you will be sharing that space with. And so that question, you know, I think in that talk, he talks about like, you know, being like thinking these cruel thoughts about a person ahead of you in the grocery store line that is like not moving fast enough or whatever, but then sort of eventually goes into the fact it's like she's a mom, she has a kid, she's like worked all day, she is by herself and like stressed and tired, and the kid is upset, and it's like that is a difficult moment that she is experiencing that day. In the same way, like in a concert, right? Like you are, you know, like in a phase in your life where you like want to go to the concert and enjoy it and be in that moment, but you could be standing next to someone like that's their first concert experience ever, and they are like so up that like they can't contain the excitement and the energy, and you guys are in just different places, and like allowing them to have that moment is like a moment of public grace and being like, this is a shared environment and we're just gonna have to
you're
like,
right.
Yeah.
That feels like it's just like a beautiful, and maybe this is a wrap-up corner, but it's like a beautiful return to the sandbox. And like, yeah, maybe a kid's gonna take your shovel, and like maybe you gotta let it roll off. Just water off a duck's back, and you're like, fine, I'll take the bucket then, and I'm gonna make this sandcastle over here because it's just not worth it.
Yeah.
Or engage, and then you have a shovel duel, and that is also a possible outcome.
Yeah. I mean, what's funny is like the unflustered book idea, at least as if that was the right book that I'd heard the author speak about it, is like you think you could interpret it as like a thing that you are doing to be like a gentle parent for your kids, but the reality is it's actually for the parents, like because then you wind up creating a dynamic where you feel less stressed, less anxious, less all of those things. Like you're doing it for you to try and be like less emotionally reactive, so that having a child and watching them grow up can be like a positive experience instead of just like a white knuckle experience. And I think that's probably the case in like these, you know, as I try, like when I actively tried to be like, why am I getting upset on the road? Like, why am I doing all of these things? Like, you're like, oh, this is more enjoyable now. Like, it's good to not feel shitty and angry, you know?
Yeah, true. You're right. Better read, better person, rising above, except for when you're on a bike. Agree to disagree. You on a bike, me at a concert. Let's just, we just have our places, okay?
Critical Nonsense is a Sylvain Produzione.
Brought to you by What Are You Doing?
As always, we'd like to thank our executive producer and chief umbrage officer, Jess Vander.
Thanks. We'd also like to thank sound engineer and the guy who always stands in the best spot at the concert, Alex Gottell.
We'd like to thank programming coordinator and man yelling at clouds, Les Jacobs.
And thanks to our production crew and always TSA agents. I don't know. Sorry, Gilbert Norm Estridge, Christy Jensen, and Amy Waters. That sounds also bad, but we're just trying to usher people through in safety. Is there a better thing? Let's just ignore me.
Yeah. And as always, thanks, Ellen. Special thanks to TSA agents. It's got to be a hard job.
It's a hard job. That's why. That sounds hard. And you know, they're trying to just make it through, and take off your shoes.
Yeah, take off your shoes. Thanks to
honestly though,
whatever the state of like how many modified pre-checks is now, to where you don't have to take off your shoes, you know.
Global TSA pre-screening special
digital
access.
ID.
Yeah. super clear, extra clear. Yeah. I don't know
Yeah.
what it is.
It will also, like, you know, is that all necessary? But this is water. Or what is water? We find ourselves here
Yeah.
in this
Or
place
just
where.
like, we just need more fast super express passes. So
Also,
everybody-
Jessica, have you heard about, what is it called? Like Boom Supersonic? This company that is like trying to produce supersonic commercial jets again?
Whoa. No.
Yeah. They've done some like test flights already. I think they are like want to have like planes in the market by like 2028 maybe. Don't quote me, but I think that's what they're like targeting.
Boom is reinventing the cockpit with an all-new flight deck for Overture.
Yeah, I think they're doing stuff in the interim to make money, but they are testing new like supersonic engines to be able to like, you know, fly from wherever, New York to Tokyo, that doesn't take 13 hours. Or I mean, even from like New York to LA, in the events you have to do that, where you're not like losing a whole day. You know, they're going back to the era of the Concorde, but trying to make a plane that doesn't require like persistent and constant repair.
Wow. Yeah, Boeing. Look out. Cool. Anyway.
Boom.
Well,
Thanks, Boom. I think, hopefully.
we'll see. Okay. That sounds good. Well, talk to you later.
Well, love you. Mean it. Bye.
Bye.